Welcome everybody to Cafe Mocha. It's on 7th Street and 2nd Avenue. I'm Paula Gloria, the hostess of the Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. Thank you for coming. We really have high consciousness here tonight, and some of these people I hope to have on shows in the future, because my show is all about community, and in order to keep community together, we really need to have an understanding of our spiritual connection. So spirituality needs to be protected. We need good politics, we need good constitutions, we need good people to be watching the government that we created to protect our rights. And this shows real spirituality and liberation, enlightenment, is about rising out of bondage, rising out of addiction, rising out of slavery. So I'm really pleased to have tonight, as a sponsor of this event, Wendy Barrett. It's a fundraiser to try to raise money for her heroic struggle in the illegal evictions where due process is being jeopardized. And this is something my husband Joe Barton is going through with his marijuana issues. But this is an issue far, far beyond marijuana. This is an issue that has to do with understanding what we are as Americans. So I'm very pleased to introduce Wendy Barrett, and she's going to explain what she has been through, and we're going to be following her progress on this show. And we hope to be having more of these physical gatherings in physical businesses that are trying to make a living, and they create our culture. It's very important that small business is protected, is nourished, because small business is run by people who are very aware of the needs of the community, and they can support the culture. Public access has been a great bastion of freedom and supporting the culture. And later on we'll be talking about case law when Joe gives his part of the show, which is his book, Those Psychedelic Kids, or The Adventures of Joe and Charlie, that really is setting the record straight on what actually happened during the 60s. So, and at that time we'll talk more about the Constitution. But for right now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Wendy Barrett. Wendy, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, she has one.
Yes, I've owned the Village Scandal down the street, 7th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, for 16 years. I came here when the neighborhood was a little more edgy. And over the last 16 years, particularly in the last 8 years or so, we've lost the culture in the neighborhood. On the corner over there, on the northwest corner of 7th Street and 2nd Avenue, was Love Saves the Day. They were a wonderful group of gentlemen and ladies that bought things they loved, vintage items, quirky items, and sold them. Their rent was more quadrupled, and they couldn't stay in business. There is story after story of lost business and lost culture in our neighborhood, commercial-wise. As well, we've lost so many of our wonderful neighbors, residential neighbors, because so many apartments are being destabilized and going for market rents. And in this neighborhood, unfortunately, NYU needs so much housing. They turn in these railroad apartments into 3 and 4 bedrooms and rent them out to students for less than what the dormitories would be, but it's still about $4,000 a month. So you can't compete with even successful working people. They're just priced out of the market. As a result, this neighborhood has become the most expensive rental district in New York, which is hard to believe, because of course it was traditionally a Yiddish neighborhood. George Gershwin grew up here and at 97 2nd Avenue, and he was the roller skating champion of East 7th Street. And of course, Miles Davis, all the great jazz people, all the great poets and writers in the 60s lived in the East Village when rents were dirt cheap. My story represents a lot of thousands upon thousands of stories I found out when I asked my neighbors to sign a petition to keep me in business. I have been getting eviction notices every single month since 2004, when a company called A.J. Clark took over management of the building, and they were billing me for real estate tax escalators, which I not only paid but overpaid. Because he was evicting me, I was paying them out of fear, and I was told every month we would do a stipulation in court and I would get credit for it and I would not be evicted again. But I've been evicted every single month as a result, and they bill me for the entire amount of the taxes due every month. So this year I get a monthly bill for just under $100,000 a month. They've billed me over $8.7 million for real estate tax escalators. I have a little tiny store. We make most of our own items, hats and accessories for gentlemen and ladies, some jewelry, ties, umbrellas. It is not a high-end business. We have very fair prices. As a result, I've been in court. I've been billed well over $100,000 on my rental statement from the management firm for being evicted every month. As well, I'm charged their legal fees in court and my legal fees. It's come to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're trying to bankrupt me. And a couple of months ago, my previous lawyer didn't show up for a hearing, and I had a default judgment against me, and a result of the default judgment, they were able to obtain a marshal's eviction. And the substance of my case was due to go to trial the next week when I lost on a default judgment. So thank goodness I found a new marvelous lawyer, Andrew Multibert, who worked day and night and got the marshal's eviction stayed pending a few things I must do, which one of them was to pay a couple of months back rent, which the management firm has been returning my rent in addition to charging me for the taxes and then demanding it again in court. That's part of the game and process. So on Monday, when we got the decision, I paid the 2 months rent, and today I learned they've rejected it again, and they're going to hold me in, try to get the marshal's eviction, because it didn't come from the corporation I filed when I signed the original lease, which I also have not had that corporation for about 4 or 5 years, and I've been paying rent checks with my new corporation, and they're trying to get the marshal's eviction reinstated based on that. Every day I am hit with something else. I have not been able to focus on growth. If I were to ever want to open a second store, if anyone looked at my records, they think this woman is the worst risk in the world, and I am really the best tenant. I paint the outside of the trim on the building. I take away the garbage and the snow when the city doesn't pick up with my private carting service. I'm not allowed to use their city service. I built the garbage containers. I put in the lighting. I just do 1,000,001 things out of my own heart, while I am treated in such a horrific way. Now, as a result of going on Paula Gloria's show a couple of weeks ago and telling the story of how I was evicted each month and had the marshal's eviction, I mentioned that I owed a lot of loans on the store, and I would have to default on them if I was suddenly locked out of my store. I had no time to make preparations to find another space. And sure enough, the day after I won the state of the eviction, pending certain performances, I am being sued by the World Trade Center Small Business Development Recovery Fund. I took out a loan for $50,000. It's down to $43,000. They're suing me. I assume they either saw the show and was afraid I was going to go out of business. I've written them letters over the years telling them that my legal fees and what is being done to me illegally could have paid back the loan 10 times over. But anyway, this is another result of the harassment. It's not just harassment, it's torture for me, what this management firm has put me through. And interestingly enough, when I was on Paula's show last week, and it went on YouTube, many people came into the Village Scandal and said they have had problems with A.J. Clark. One lady came in from the neighborhood that had children in the 60s and rented from them on the Upper West Side. She had a small child, and the backyard was filled with mold. They promised to fix it. This is their story, probably how they train their employees. I would imagine it's first say you'll fix it, then get nasty. And a lot of women in particular will back down if you're nasty. And so she didn't back down. Her child got sick. She eventually had to leave. They threatened to sue her, keep her security, all this. I've uncovered another case where a lady was charged $250 extra on her rent bill each month on a residential apartment. She tried, they didn't know what it was for. They said it was a mistake, which is another thing they use. And it is, they said they'd resolve it. They never did. Then they got nasty. Then they threatened to evict her. And this is the story. I've heard about 20 stories, all women, mostly single women, mostly young women. And I think what they did to me was when they took over management, and that's how I found out they took over management and evicted me, I tried to deal with a person at the building manager named Steve at A.J. Clark, 1881 Broadway. And I was trying to please him. I always believed him when he said he'd give me credit for the taxes and never evict me again. And he'd amend the lease as they were supposed to do in 2004. And he never did it. And I had faith. I like to believe the best in people. I brought my cousin in a couple of years ago, who's been in real estate for 35 years in a very high fiduciary and responsible position for the state of New York, and oversees billions of dollars. And she wrote in her affidavit for court that she had never known a real estate firm in her nearly 40-year history that both practices and encourages corruption. They promise you everything. They didn't even return her calls. That's not done. These people need to not be able to hurt anybody, and most of all, the building is owned by one or two dentists. One of the dentists is Mark Raymer. He's a lovely man, and I knew if he knew what was being done to me, he would put an end to it. Absolutely. My blood pressure, since this happened, I got my marshal's eviction on the week of this week. My blood pressure was 208 over 112. 199 over 110. You know, it is harassment just for the sake of harassment. I'm more than happy to pay the rent. Not only pay the rent, I offered to pay more rent and do a fair tax share, which I was promised, which is called pro rata. Pro rata is based, the percentage of the raised taxes you paid is based on the percentage of the floor space you occupy in a building. In my case, I occupy 8% of the building. The taxes should be 8%, which I was promised in 2004. I'm more than happy, as I say, to even pay more base rent and the 8%. I'm more than happy to keep doing all the jobs I've done for the building, although I'd like to be reimbursed for damages done to my building for hiring contractors that weren't licensed, and I had many floods. But my story, I'm not alone. The city council must adopt some kind of limits on rents for small businesses under, let's say, $50 million a year, or whatever dollar they pick, or whatever size they pick, to keep the flavor of the neighborhoods. Yeah, as well as keeping, of course, rent-stabilized residential laws in effect. Otherwise, we're going to become a city of the rich. It's going to be homogenous. Already, you know, Disney has taken over Broadway. There's going to be no reason to visit the different neighborhoods. It's just a crime, and every time I take a walk, another one of my favorite businesses is gone. And it happens to be the most lovely people, the people that are always cleaning the sidewalk and doing extra things and planting, and we're community activists. We must be rewarded for giving to our city instead of being, you know, penalized and subject to these, you know, really untenable laws in tenant-landlord court, particularly in the commercial division. There's no protection whatsoever. It's just about collecting money and evicting people. And there's really almost no chance to win, even though I had a trial scheduled for May 4th and couldn't wait to present all my cashier's checks that I paid for taxes. I was never able to do that because they got the marshal's eviction. I'm hoping to get into court to do that, but it just seems an impossible task. I also want to tell everybody that in every lease, and this is not just commercial and it is residential too, there is a clause in there that says nothing said verbally can be relied on. So when you're signing a lease, even if you have a lawyer with you, the lawyer can't say, this looks pretty average. No, you must know each item per item. It must be written down. Subletting, anything. Otherwise, they are not held to it. That's why A.J. Clark tells you the world verbally, and then of course reneges on all of it because they know it's not legally binding. This is for all leases. I'm not a lawyer, but I've learned a heck of a lot, and I've been up against the best of the lawyers, and I've been through 3 lawyers in this past year. The first 2, well, anyway, the second one was the one that caused the marshal's eviction to happen, which was really quite negligent. So that's my story. I need support. I'm offering, if you buy a gift certificate for $100 or $25, I'll give you 50% more. Spend it yourself or give it as a gift. I need financial support. I also, out of this, have realized what we need is an ethical real estate management company, and I want to start a company called Ethical Management. I already have some highly ethical people on board. The priests from across the street, the Ukrainian church, may come on board. They will be the most ethical people. And I believe in most cases that you can solve a problem with a tenant harmoniously. If they need to be evicted after everything else is exhausted, fine, but you don't evict illegally because you want to just make more money. And the problem is these buildings are being bought as part of pension plans and out-of-town owners. It's no longer the little ethnic landlord that owns one building. They're bought by multi-millionaires and billionaires, and we must have an ethical management company to manage that. So I also am interested in raising money for ethical real estate management. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, darling.
I have a particular affection for small business because I had a small wicker furniture store in Berkeley, California for 10 years. And because I think Hong Kong was being lost, and because of that, all the money was coming out of Hong Kong, and real estate in California went sky high. It was impossible for me to do the right thing, which was to buy the building, you know, sort of work your way into it. Yeah. And so I took the $30,000 that I had, which should have been a down payment on a building, put it into the cellular telephone lotteries and made $5 million. But the most rewarding time in my life was that small store, because that's where I met people, that's where I felt the community. And so I'm, with great honor, I'm introducing David Casavas, and he can explain more about what's really going on and how it's not really ethics, we really want due process. We want the Constitution upheld, equal protection. So take it away, David.
Okay. I'd like to start with what's basic, because you heard what is basic right here. You hear someone who's gone through a lot that she shouldn't have gone through. And the baseline that everybody's got to understand is that we need jobs and we need small businesses. Small businesses should be allowed to thrive because they hire people. I went over to this lady's store, I met a young lady she hired. That young lady wouldn't have had a job if she didn't have the store. So what we're trying to do is strangle the very job-creating machine that can actually get us out of this terrible recession. That's basic. That's something we all have to understand. We also have some serious problems here which she went through. We have problems in which we have people who just want everything to be big. They want big buildings, big businesses, big everything. And in the end, the answer is no. The answer is we have a community here. And that really gets us to the view from above. Picture the community as if it was a rainforest. In a rainforest, you have all different types of creatures. There's a room for everything. Everything and every animal has a niche. In business, it's the same thing. You have a rainforest, and everybody occupies a niche. This lady occupies an interesting niche, which actually brings in more business. Tourists come in to see this. Other people come to buy things. It works. What we're doing here is we're taking a rainforest and turning it into a parking lot. And it's easy to turn a rainforest into a parking lot. It's not easy to turn around and turn a parking lot into a rainforest. And that's what we're doing. That's what the government's doing. That's what a lot of these politicians are doing. Because all these politicians really care about is putting their own money in their own pocket and then getting elected again and again and again. When I ran for borough president. I wanted to get rid of the borough presidency because it was useless. It did nearly nothing. And those people in the borough presidencies and other politicians laid off an awful lot of people who were working. And if you lay off people that are working and you don't allow small businesses to thrive, what are you going to do with them? Where are they going to go? All you want to do is have everybody shine your own shoes, and that we're not going to have. I urge people to support small businesses, and I can also say, in this case, we lose our community. If you will, we lose our rainforest, because everybody works together. That was always what a neighborhood was about. Everybody does something. Everybody interacts with somebody else. And it makes, in this case, it makes for a very colorful neighborhood. If you want to make this a place where you're just going to have big buildings and an awful lot of people working on Wall Street, commuting to Wall Street and commuting back, I got news for you. Not only will it kill everything, it's not going to work. Because Wall Street isn't going to be there forever. We pretend that it is, but for many, many years, going back 25, 30 years, we knew it wasn't. We've already watched it shrink. We watched the job shrink there, and guess what? Sometimes those guys don't make enough money that they come here and they can buy their cappuccinos. Our people need to be more than that. We need to be a community. Now, there are many details I could go into. I understand what this lady's gone through. I did a lot of work in real estate before I ran for office. I understand how people behave. But the most important thing is that we stand up for our community. And we believe our community as a whole, and that everybody belongs here. Everybody's got to make a living, and they're not asking to be rich. What we have is a lot of politicians who want to be rich, and we've got a lot of people who want to buy a piece of the city from them. And for that, we should say no. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, David. And I hope to have you as a guest in the future with Wendy, and we'll have call-ins, because this is a complex topic. Thank you, David. I really appreciate you making those comments, and I look forward to having you and Wendy as guests. Perhaps we can have a panel, because this is such a deep topic. We're going to be cutting the cameras now because we're going to be having a screening of Those Psychedelic Kids Are the Adventures of Joe and Charlie. Joe is my husband. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you want to see this, stay tuned for future screenings, because we're not going to be posting these chapters in Joe's book. Today we're going to be listening to chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. So again, in the future, we want to have these gatherings on these deep and really painful topics, but topics that we know we can overcome. And we want to kind of take, what would you say, a message, a spirit of the 60s that, you know, people assembled in Woodstock. It was the largest gathering of people just for the purpose of peace. So if you think that illegal evictions can't be stopped, or if you think that, you know, taxes are impossible, you know, these things can be overcome. And we're learning more about case law, constitutional law, understanding how not to be tricked out of jurisdiction, the importance of your rights. We're going to be learning in the future about the importance of the belligerent claimant. But for right now, we're going to be cutting the cameras and just having a lot of fun listening to Those Psychedelic Kids, or The Adventures of Joe and Charlie. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce my husband, Joe Barton. He's going to talk about what the purpose is of this book and what is the purpose of setting the record straight about what was going on in the 60s. So, happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. I wrote this book. I'm doing this book because so much lies have been told. The government has told everybody, made everybody think that anyone who takes drugs is a bad person. So I just wanted to try to set the record straight. Anyway, pretty much the government has controlled what people think, or most people don't know what happened in the 60s unless they lived it. And a lot of the people who lived it, if you really lived it, it's hard to remember what happened. Yeah. But I don't want to talk a lot. I'm not really good in front of a big crowd of people. I'm a one-on-one person. But we're going to go to chapter 2. Thank you.
No, first we're going to have the cake, aren't we?
Yes.
Oh.
We're going to have the cake.
Yeah. We're going to like the cake, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
This is Wendy. Everybody should support Wendy's fight. And that's something we should all do. Everybody should start standing up more and fighting in court. You know, we need to bring the Constitution back into strength, and only we the people can make the Constitution strong again.
Well, the self-policing in the legal profession, that's got to be fixed. So you've got judges waiting for you.
Right, right.
What we're wanting to do in the future is have gatherings like this, have chapters in the future, because there's amazing stories. It was a real eye-opener for me as Joe's story advances. But we want to intersperse it with understanding our Constitution, because all of the amendments are important, and some real magic happens in court, and magic is starting to happen for Joe, and we hope to show those wins that will blaze the trail. But in illegal evictions, the commercial thing, the management company, the problem, we're hoping Wendy Barrett will be this person that will lead the way and do what others of us have. We kind of thought maybe the problem will go away, but it doesn't go away. We have to stand up for our rights. We should learn how not to be tricked out of giving them up. We have to become the belligerent claimant, and we have to be belligerent, because if our rights weren't being violated, why be belligerent? But if they are being violated, you can't just go along with it and say everything's fine and dandy, because people are strained right now. They're barely making their rent. They're facing evictions. It's happening so much. But as Wendy pointed out, we're also going to lose the culture. If you overturn case law, if you get tricked out of jurisdiction, you can't hook up to the greatness of what this country is about. I mean, that's how I see it.
I agree. Let's have the cake in chapter 2. Thank you.
I didn't hear any difference.
It's to the camera.
Happy birthday, dear Charlie. Happy birthday to you.
This is a beautiful cake. Thanks to Wendy Barrett. Wendy has some food around here.
Thank you,
Thank you so much for doing this.
I
Well, happened was special.
You can always go find a friend and share it. Is that too? Half that size, Shanti? Give it to someone else. Here, I'm going to... Here's Shanti. Special Shanti.
Wow, good.
This woman watches M&N day and night, Joe. She knows all of us. Happy birthday. Thank you. Yes. Have you seen her? Gandhi, got some fans of yours right here. Fans. You get one by M&A.
We went that Cypress film. Cypress film.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Joe! Manja, pasta.
How's everyone doing?
Well, it's bird plane. Fireworks.
Thank you, Wendy Barrett from the Village Scandal, for this beautiful birthday cake.
Hey, Daniel. I gave you couple of good times. You got into the building, right? Did you get one here?
Oh, that's
Entrance of the building. No, it's not the same. Entrance of the building. I never used it. I think
Are we doing this?
yeah.
Is that one right there? Top left.
So Joe, I saw chapter 1, and you left off on 6th Street.
3 and 4, $10 for all 4 chapters. Would you like to contribute to the cause?
Thank you.
Oh yeah, yes. I got stories about the dead in other chapters.
Great. Thank you very much, Joe Barton. That was chapter 2. And for anybody who wants the few other chapters, we have 3 and 4 also. So these 2 that you saw, you can share with a friend in the privacy of your home. We're not going to be putting these out on the internet or broadcasting them. What we want to do is use them as kind of a galvanizing method to get people together so we start to share experiences. We particularly want to highlight being Americans, being free people, being free to enjoy and to make choices that we want, not to be living in a police state. We just want to go by the Constitution. It's a really nicely written document. There was a revolution. We have it. We have case law. Great judges have made very heroic decisions in the face of huge corruption. It's been done before. Why don't we do it again? I'm sure we can. And I'd like to introduce Alan Steinfeld to talk about new realities, because new realities, in a way, I used to say to Alan, how can there be such a thing as a new reality? Reality is just reality. Is it new or is it old? So when you look at something like the Constitution, I was astonished that I started to see similarities in ancient things like in the Vedas. You know, not to mention the Bible and so on. Now, I know people, you know, are questioning whether God even exists, but let's say where you're able to act in such a way that it's not because of your society around you and, you know, your image. You're acting more from something deep inside you that you know is going to lead the way, and you will be successful, although you have to go through a lot. So Alan, do you want to speak?
About what? Which passage?
Just new realities, or what this event has meant, or constitutional law, or anything.
Well, I think it's nice that we have such a great turnout for Joe's birthday, and you've really brought him into our New York family and integrated a whole new network connecting to Woodstock.
But you can see with the chapters, he was New York family before.
Yes, he was new. Yes, he was. So I think what Joe and Paula are trying to do is awareness of a new way of living, a new reality in essence to all of us as citizens, to take back our rights as citizens, you know, and to be free to do what the Constitution really says, which is freedom of speech, freedom to be who you are. And as we move into a sort of a universal culture, a kind of culture that's beyond borders because of the internet and other technologies, I think that freedom is more important, and it's a kind of we can be an example of what that's like to the rest of the world without being too patriotic or dogmatic about that. But the world did look to America at once for an example of freedom, and now I think we have fallen down on that job, and other countries are. But the whole idea of countries is just ridiculous in general. So I think the new reality is no borders, universal freedom, freedom of speech for everybody, the end of slavery, the end of war, the end of imperialism and dogma, and the beginning of freedom on the level of the common human being. I think that's the most important thing. So thanks for inviting me, Paula.
Thank you, Alan. And I'm really thrilled that somebody came tonight who actually has a legal issue, and this is what I was hoping. I was hoping that Joe's chapters would be kind of, you know, fun, talking about the 60s and when everybody was young and there was this great vision. And I think it's, you know, I think people recognize still the music is the best. I mean, Is it just because I'm older, I'm not finding that the music today was like it was in the 60s? When I was in high school, you just dreamed, you just soared, you just knew it would be a better world. And later on in the future chapters, Joe talks about how this culture was breaking down all the barriers, the religious barriers, the racial barriers. He said you could be in Washington Square Park with blacks here and Chicanos here, and you know, everybody was getting along because they had this experience of this universal consciousness. And I think that's something, you know, my husband is a marijuana activist for 40 years, but he has been fighting for the religious use of marijuana. That's even beyond the medical use. Obviously, when you're in tune with your purpose of why you're here, then the body follows. Then there's great health. It all comes about. I'm wondering if you can share with us your story? And maybe Wendy can comment on it too. Okay, Frank is going to say something before you speak.
Hi.
But come and sit here. And
in a nutshell,
the
problem is out of control capitalism and greed. When CEOs can make off like bandits and outsource, and that's traitorism, and it's just ridiculous. I think it's a moral crime to be a billionaire, and especially being a multi-billionaire. So when is enough enough? So it's great to have money and freedom and truth and justice for all, but when we live in a country that gives carte blanche to this kind of criminality, obviously the gangsters are running the ship.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for coming, and thank you for participating in the meals here at Cafe Mocha. And I want to thank Cafe Mocha and Wendy Barrett for making this space available so that we can meet together. And I'm hoping that we can do this at least once a month. We can go through the future chapters, but what I also am excited about, I want to go over more court wins, people who are winning in court. In order to learn about this, I'm spending hours and hours on the internet. I'm listening to people from all parts of the country. You know, I think as New Yorkers, we get a little arrogant. We think we're so sophisticated and we know it all. But when you start hearing these guys with these, you know, accents that I used to judge, and they're winning in court. They're winning their farms back. They're showing the banks were doing fraud. They're understanding how the fraud was done. It's really exciting. There's a lady named Angela Stark out of Los Angeles who's got an internet show, and sometimes she's got 200 people listening with rapt attention, all taking notes. And one of these guys that was fighting for the foreclosures, which by the way are really forfeitures, it's really a tax thing. I mean, did you know that when you got your mortgage, you thought you were getting a loan from the bank? That was paid in full from your own account. And that account was set up when the country went bankrupt and it reorganized and the gold was lost. We became the collateral. We have different aspects of this, and we're going to be learning more. But the exciting thing is Angela Stark has real people on her show. And once this lady called up, she was very elderly. She was losing her place. You could see she didn't really have the ability to learn all this herself, but she had the courage to listen to the radio show, because it goes on for hours, and to call and to frame her question. Now, the expert was too overloaded. He couldn't take on another case, but somebody else was listening, and he wanted to practice for his own foreclosure, so he went and helped this older lady, and he discovered that the judges were totally happy to go along with it. It's just that you have to do it legally. You have to understand due process. You have to understand equal protection. It's one thing to say, oh, phooey on being a billionaire, but it's another thing to say, are these judges acting correctly? It's another thing in the appeals court. Joe now has his case in the New York appeals, and we found out that the transcripts are being altered. What use is it to have an appeal if the transcripts are being altered? But we have so many other ways to show that it's not only, you don't need to legalize marijuana. You don't even actually have to repeal it, because it never actually came into law. It's just that as these established institutions come about and the media sways us, we begin to believe it. And I think that's the exciting thing about Joe's chapters, to see young people just being free, having fun, discovering things. When I first heard, it was in Central Park, I had the camera on Joe, and this was a restricted story, so he wasn't sure he wanted to give it for public access, but he told the story that you just saw now when he went catatonic. I think it was what, 2 or 3 days?
3 days.
3 days, catatonic. So meanwhile, I'm hearing these guys in Denver are taking cancer people, and they're going catatonic sometimes for 10 days, but they emerge with no cancer. Now this is something we need to pay attention, and this is something that's really tough because we've got doctors, we've got scientists, everybody is trading this knowledge kind of under the table. We need to come out. All of you who came, I thank all of you for coming because this is the first step. We're showing up and we're turning out. And so now I want to introduce somebody who's going to tell us her story, and then maybe Wendy can put her thinking cap on, or Joe, and we can sort of see if we can put this into
perspective?
Yeah, into use. What's your name?
Sansonia.
Sansonia.
Hi. My story is, without going too far deep, I feel like I'm being railroaded by a multi-million-dollar corporation, and I feel like I'm being bullied into giving something that I paid for, that I own, that I have the rights to, and they want me to relinquish my rights, which would then be an admission of guilt, as though I did something wrong to them to hurt their financial gains. But it's
Take your time to explain the story, because probably other people have the same story.
Well, I don't want to talk about it too much, because
okay.
I mean, I need to find out more about. I just got the letter in the mail today, so it's processing for me, right. And I'm doing my due diligence on my part as much as possible, because if you're uninformed, you can't make appropriate decisions. So what I would say is to fight as much as humanly possible to your last breath, and to get as much knowledge as possible, because they're going to take advantage of you. And when they do it to one person, then they're going to do it to 2 people, and then it turns to 4, and it turns to 8, and it becomes like a multiplication table versus the individual.
And then people accept it as accepted behavior.
Exactly, and then we all become cattle.
Right.
So that's the moral to the story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Joe, Joe, I want you to say one thing about understanding the Webster's and the Black's Law Dictionary. This is a very important trick, and pay attention to this. It's simple.
Okay, this is something a lot of people don't know, and they don't tell you. When you go into court, and they're trying to put charges on you, the judge will always say, "Do you understand the charges against you?" When he's saying, "Do you understand the charges against you?" he's not using the understand that we all know from Webster's dictionary. In law, if you look in Black's Law Dictionary, when the judge says to you, "Do you understand the charges against you?" what he's really saying is, "Do you stand under these charges?" If you say yes, then the trial automatically goes on. If you say, "No, I do not understand these charges. What am I doing here? By what authority do you have to bring me here?" Now that causes a problem for them, because the only way they can put you in jail or fine you is when you concede jurisdiction. If you never concede jurisdiction under the kind of laws that we have today, it's not a constitutional court. It's all the courts that we have in this country are now incorporated. They're commercial courts. And the only way that they can prosecute you in a commercial court is by your agreement. And only they trick you. They use a lot of different tricks to try to get jurisdiction over you. If you say, "I do not accept any of this, I don't stand under the charges," they can't take you to court.
Can they charge you with contempt of court?
No, they can't charge you with contempt. As long as you say, "I don't understand the charges against me, how am I here?" They have to prove to you that they have jurisdiction over you.
You may not know what jurisdiction means. Constitution, explain.
Right. Now, under the Constitution, we the people are sovereigns. As long as you assert your sovereignty, they don't have any authority over you. They don't have jurisdiction over you. The minute you plead guilty or you accept the charges, if you say, "Yes, I understand," you've now given them authority over you.
Even pleading not guilty.
It's such a trick.
Joe, even pleading not guilty.
Right. Even pleading not guilty. If you go into court and plead not guilty, you've now put in a plea, so now the case is going to go on. If you say, no, I'm not going to plea, I have proved that you have jurisdiction over me first, then they have to try, show me the crime, prove that it's a crime, show me how you have authority constitutionally. Always argue the Constitution, because all the courts today are incorporated and they're under the Uniform Commercial Code. You tell them, I don't stand under the Uniform Commercial Code, I want to be in a constitutional court. And that jams them up. Thank you, have a good night.
And now we're going to have Joe Friendly, and I know he's going to make good comments on this because Joe Friendly went to the same law school that President Obama went to, except Joe Friendly decided to become a public access producer, and I think he's one of the most dearly loved icons in New York City. I would not be where I am right now without Joe's help. Whenever I need a camera fixed or someone to come down, Joe's there. So thank you, Joe. Yay, Joe.
How's it sound there, Frank? Sounds good?
Sounds good.
This was a good cake.
Yes.
Chocolate, oh, such chocolate.
It's not chocolate, it's hair.
And now getting down to it, the idea is this here, a new reality. I looked up reality when I was studying, finishing up college and studying anthropology and how the different cultures had different ideas about reality. And there are different meanings of the word reality if you look it up into the dictionary. There's the actual, truthful reality, but then number two, the other realities that the word applies to are the cultural realities, and one of them is the consensus reality. So we're living in a system of reality in terms of consensus reality controlled by the commercial media primarily, and that culture we can condemn as corrupt, wrong, evil. Uncle Sam is a big bully. I wear that on my cap. Uncle Sam is a big bully. And I have another cap that says, let's replace our corrupt government. And I took that cap and I was showing around in the post office, and the people working in the post office got a kick out of it, and they went through the slot into all the staff, and then they're all going, yeah, our government should be replaced. It is corrupt. They can see it quite clearly, but people can't imagine how we can do that. But on the show that we advertised here, I talked about how we could create a new reality, how we could rescue our culture from commercialism, that we could actually focus national attention on the proposition that we can do better than commercialism, that commercialism is a way of interacting that is second rate, that we feel in our heart a better way to do things. From the heart, the conscience clear, and the boss says, hey, come on, you got to do a little selling or you're not going to, you got to push around corporate policies that don't feel right, or get out of here. So, in terms of saving our culture, I am hopeful that finally we can see the lie for what it is and say none of the above, no thank you. Or the language I put it in yesterday on the show was we ceremoniously withdraw our consent from a corrupt government out loud, publicly. No violence, just sorry, you guys are a corrupt criminal enterprise. And instead, we're going to attach the powers of government, our allegiance to who? That's the question. So I came up with a list. Anybody remember any of the names on the list? Amy Goodman, Tom Hartman, Ralph Nader, Michael Moore. We could come up with a group, like if we were in Egypt right now and we're riding in the street and the TV says, all right, so if you win your revolution, what do you want to make happen? Let's go right for that point and articulate what an appropriate government would be, and then we'll create, as Alan Steinfeld once said, a new reality.
Thank you.
So that's the shtick. I think marijuana can be a tool to creating this new reality, because when you smoke the marijuana, the cultural con game pales, and you have the authority of your own natural senses. So that,
What do you think about the Constitution?
well, my idea about that moment when they say, how do you plead? If we're talking marijuana, you say, Your Honor, the law I don't have to plead to because I'm challenging the law is unconstitutional. The legal language is I'm demurring to the constitutional, on constitutional grounds, I'm demurring to this pleading.
Explain demur.
And so the whole word is, demur is like that, but in French, demur means none of the above. I'm not doing it, you got to do something different. I want a hearing on constitutionality. What's your argument for constitutionality? Fundamental, constitutionally protected individual human rights are at stake. Such as the right of freedom of thought. Freedom of thought, does marijuana help freedom of thought? That's the question. When you smoke a little, like they've been asking, in fact, let me jump to a different point, because I think this is the point I was going to say. I forgot, and you remind me.
I knew you had it in you.
Here it is. I watched on Channel 5 today. They were talking about legalizing marijuana. They're bringing it around. The establishment is finally saying, well, if they're doing it medically in California, people are noticing that, hey, it isn't so bad, Marijuana is about waking up. Is that true? We've just been saying that. It's waking up. The government doesn't want us to wake up.
No.
So the point is
They don't want us to do anything they don't get a percentage of. They are extortionists.
I think it's broader. I think I'm talking about reality. I'm talking about the consensual reality being upset, a new blip, boing, people see the manipulation of the culture. With marijuana, you get hip to the manipulation. We have to be very clever and use our artistic power, the powers of reason, whatever we can come up with, to help the legalization of marijuana lead to the marijuana being used in an optimal way along the lines of rejecting an evil, rotten system, being able to see that and going for the good one. I'm saying it's a way for you to see the truth.
Yes.
Is marijuana good for truth?
Yes.
And there is a truth to be faced that we're living a big lie, that the people who have power shouldn't have the power.
We're going to have Joe Friendly, and I know he's going to make good comments on this because Joe Friendly went to the same law school that President Obama went to, except Joe Friendly decided to become a public access producer, and I think he's one of the most dearly loved icons in New York City. I would not be where I am right now without Joe's help. Whenever I need a camera fixed or someone to come down, Joe's there. So thank you, Joe. Yay, Joe.
How's it sound there, Frank? Sounds good?
Sounds good.
This was a good cake.
Yes.
Chocolate, oh, such chocolate.
It's not chocolate, it's hair.
And now getting down to it, the idea is this here, a new reality. I looked up reality when I was studying, finishing up college and studying anthropology and how the different cultures had different ideas about reality. And there are different meanings of the word reality if you look it up in the dictionary. There's the actual truthful reality, but then number two, the other realities that the word applies to are the cultural realities, and one of them is the consensus reality. So we're living in a system of reality in terms of consensus reality controlled by the commercial media primarily, and that culture we can condemn as corrupt, wrong, evil. Uncle Sam is a big bully. I wear that on my cap. Uncle Sam is a big bully. And I have another cap that says, let's replace our corrupt government. And I took that cap and I was showing around in the post office. And the people working in the post office got a kick out of it. And they went through the slot into all the staff. And then they're all going, yeah, yeah. Our government should be replaced. It is corrupt. They can see it quite clearly, but people can't imagine how we can do that. But on the show that we advertised here, I talked about how we could create a new reality, how we could rescue our culture from commercialism, that we could actually focus national attention on the proposition that we can do better than commercialism, that commercialism is a way of interacting that is second-rate, that we feel in our heart a better way to do things, from the heart, the conscience clear, and the boss says, hey, come on, you got to do a little selling or you're not going to, you got to push around corporate policies that don't feel right or get out of here. So, in terms of saving our culture, I am hopeful that finally we can see the lie for what it is and say none of the above, no thank you, or the language I put it in yesterday on the show was we ceremoniously withdraw our consent from a corrupt government out loud, publicly. No violence, just sorry, you guys are a corrupt criminal enterprise. And instead, we're going to attach the powers of government, our allegiance to who? That's the question. So I came up with a list. Anybody remember any of the names on the list? Amy Goodman, Tom Hartman, Ralph Nader, Michael Moore. We could come up with a group, like if we were in Egypt right now and we're riding in the street and the TV says, all right, so if you win your revolution, what do you want to make happen? Let's go right for that point and articulate what an appropriate government would be, and then we'll create, as Alan Steinfeld once said, a new reality.
Thank you.
So that's the shtick. I think marijuana can be a tool to creating this new reality, because when you smoke the marijuana, the cultural con game pales, and you have the authority of your own natural senses. So, well, my idea about that moment when they say, how do you plead? If we're talking marijuana, you say, Your Honor, the law I don't have to plead to because I'm challenging the law is unconstitutional. The legal language is I'm demurring to the constitutional, on constitutional grounds, I'm demurring to this pleading.
Explain demur.
And so the whole word is, demur is like that, but in French, demur means none of the above. I'm not doing it. You got to do something different. I want a hearing on constitutionality. What's your argument for constitutionality? Fundamental, constitutionally protected individual human rights are at stake. Such as the right of freedom of thought. Freedom of thought. Does marijuana help freedom of thought? That's the question. When you smoke a little, like they've been asking, in fact, let me jump to a different point, because I think this is the point I was going to say. I forgot, didn't you remember?
I knew you had it in you.
Here it is. I watched on Channel 5 today. They were talking about legalizing marijuana. They're bringing it around. The establishment is finally saying, well, if they're doing it medically in California, people are noticing that, hey, it isn't so bad, Marijuana is about waking up. Is that true? We've just been saying that. It's waking up. The government doesn't want us to wake up.
No.
So the point is
They don't want us to do anything they don't get a percentage of. They are extortionists.
I think it's broader. I think I'm talking about reality. I'm talking about the consensual reality being upset, a new blip, boing, people see the manipulation of the culture. With marijuana, you get hip to the manipulation. We have to be very clever and use our artistic power, the powers of reason, whatever we can come up with, to help the legalization of marijuana lead to the marijuana being used in an optimal way along the lines of rejecting an evil, rotten system, being able to see that and going for the good one. I'm saying it's a way for you to see the truth.
Yes.
Is marijuana good for truth?
Yes.
And there is a truth to be faced that we're living a big lie, that the people who have power shouldn't have the power. All right, that's it. That's the shake. I hope we use it.
Joe. I would like to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I just want to add to what he was saying about in our Judeo-Christian tradition, it is our God-given right to take the sacred cannabis plant as medicine or whatever. Because in Genesis chapter 1, verses 11, it says, "And I give you green seed-bearing plant as food." And so we have a God-given right. And no plant is illegal. Obviously, God creates something, has a 5,000-year-old history. The father of agriculture, Shin Nung in China, has been prescribing it, and throughout Arabia, Asia, and Africa, it is a medicine. In 1974, the University of Virginia study proved no lethal doses. In fact, it cured cancer, but Nixon put the kibosh on that. He didn't want a nation of potheads, and he wanted bellicose warmongers to go to war, and so alcohol, which is a proven brain damager and creates violence, is legal. But cannabis, which is a sacred healing plant that has a worldwide history of being respected, is, quote, unlegal. I say no. No plant is unlegal in God's eyes, and we have a God-given right to recognize what is truth versus lies. So obviously the whole pharmafia lobby is into creating profit. Michael Moore's movie Sicko proved that, and we just know it from the get-go. They're out to try to make money off of our sickness instead of healing. And the plant is a sacred healing plant. Herb is a natural weed, as there are many wonderful plants out there that can do wonderful things to help change us and help us naturally and effectively. So just stand by the fact that no person is illegal and no plant is illegal, even though the government says so. I'm Frank Craven. Watch What's Ailing Healing America, Friday nights at 9:30, Channel 34.
And now I want to introduce a special person who is a poet. This is Nick.
Hi. Yeah.
And I've asked him to recite a poem that he recited to Ezra Pound when he visited him as a political prisoner when you were a very young man, right?
Right. Yeah, I belong to an organization that tried to get him out of the Gulag Archipelago. We set the standard, and the Soviets copied. St. Elizabeth's Asylum for the politically insane. And that's what the Gulag was all about. Once you get labeled politically insane, that means you don't go to court to testify on your behalf. That's why they gave him that sentence in St. Elizabeth's, so that he would never have a day in court to prove that he was working for Simpson as a double agent to spy on Mussolini and to give information to the Allies on where to land in Anzio to hit the Nazis from behind. So Simpson, who is the Secretary of Defense, then drops dead. He's the only one that knows. So he spent 12 years in St. Elizabeth's Asylum for the politically insane for nothing. But in the meantime, he had brought to his bosom every literary star in this country. Robert Frost, Archibald MacLeish, Ginsberg, everybody went there to visit him and to protest, to release him, and we won. It took 12 years.
Can you recite a poem that you,
okay.
Because in those gloomy circumstances, you were a bright, you and others like you, young people, that he was trying to inspire
right.
for a new generation.
I asked him to edit this hymn that I wrote for the American Indian Church, because I used to hang out with the American Indians, try to get them rights. And I remember I once asked Harry Truman why he didn't take better care of the Indians. I said, why do we treat the Indians so miserably? I mean, look at the way they live on the Pine Ridge Reservation. He says, everybody's entitled to hate at least one race. He says, and that's the race my people hate. He says, because they killed my ancestors, and we'll never forgive them for that. Yeah. Well, he was from Missouri. He was a captain in World War I. He told MacArthur where to get off when he was trying to win the war.
Come on, back to poetry.
All right. Okay. So I asked, all right.
He's a sensitive person.
Right,
Such a
right.
gloomy place.
So I says, Ezra, I says, how do you like this poem? I says, may your great spirit, oh, Gitchy Manito, bless our mortal hours of joy and woe. May we never have to limp on wounded knee for standing tall and free. May our children be spared from fears, spared another long trail of tears. May our defenders be as bold as the ghost-shirted warriors of old. May our honored dead never be forgotten. May their spirits every spring be re-begotten. Once we puffed on plumed pipes for peace. To the four winds our best smoke we send to please. wait. Once the butterfly, the thunderbird, the butterflies and bees, oh yeah, sang for rain under thunder-blasted trees. Once blue-eyed cornfields grew long gold tresses, pollinated gently by the four winds' caresses. Once masked kachinas danced with immortal serpents before our painted tents as we chanted our prayers. I got that messed up. And then once the moon, the morning star and sun forgave us for the tears we make run from Gitchy Manito's all-seeing eye, watching us from his cloud-faced sky. And the American Indians made that part of their hymn. It was accepted by Bishop William Marcellus, otherwise known as Chief Bearheart. He's a Creek Indian. And I asked him once, hey, what does a Creek do when he meets a Greek? And I expected him to say opening a restaurant. And he says, they write a hymn. So he gave me mescaline during the Holy Communion. He said, you sit in the circle, and it's mountainside, and the congregation was sitting there doing their mescaline. And that's where the words came. And he said, did you see any visions? I says, yeah. I says, I came out in Central Park after being in the subway, and I saw my 5-year-old niece holding on to this claw of this huge polar bear. And he says, and a child shall lead you. So I says, then my niece jumped up and she went, hey, there's my Uncle Nick. And I shook paws with the bear, and he said, you have to dance for this bear every week. He says, every Sunday, otherwise you will not be under his protection. Well, anyway, this poem is dedicated to you. Your beauty weaves my destiny across the shuttling loom of Lady Love's endless tapestry. With the help of the 3 Fates sisters, Lady Love seeks out her most glamorous threads to portray your image fair. She seeks out threads hued with iridescent hope to portray my pining heart. The 3 Fates sisters spin, weave, and cut patterns out of time. They knit the living to the dead. Tick-tocking cuckoo clocks, ticking metronomes, count out our mortal hours woven on the woof, weft, and weave of Lady Love's endless tapestry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was unexpected part. But Nick, tell me, what did Ezra think about the American Indians? And what do you think about mescaline? I thought he wasn't into altering consciousness.
Oh, are you kidding? He was
It's probably a drinker, right?
He was like Jung. He was interested in all cultures. He was very humanitarian. He was labeled an anti-Semite, and yet his best friends were two Jews, you know, Ginsburg and that doctor from New Jersey, Ezra Pound.
Ezra Pound.
Right. Well, of course, he wrote about the bankers and how they were going to do this country. And he influenced Eustace Mullins.
So the Rockefellers were Jews?
No.
Hey.
Here's one of my viewers. He's shy.
Just glad to be here.
What did you learn from the evening? Because you were too shy to even call me up.
It's true, yes, but I'm so glad to be here because it's very warm and very friendly.
Yeah.
I might add, and it's nice to be among people like the people that are here.
Yeah.
So bless you all, and hopefully we get to see each other again. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I tell the joke?
Yeah, tell a joke. Yeah, because that's the thing. We want to have happy and fun along with all the...
This one is about the Niagara Falls nursing home for senile delinquents. So this old guy comes up to this old girl and he says, "Hey, honey, how about you and me making whoopee?" He says, "Go on, you old fart." She says, "You couldn't get it up if your life depended on it." He says, "Well, why don't we watch TV together? And if you hold it," she says, "we can discuss what I'll buy for you tomorrow at the shopping mall." She says, "All right." So the next day she comes down again to the day room and she sees him with another little old lady, and he says, "You no good two-timing rat, you son of a bitch." He says, "What does that slut have that I don't have?" He says, "Parkinson's."
Parkinson's. But you know, actually, that's a joke, but I'm realizing as I'm studying more, you know, different scientists and doctors and watching, we have some tremendous potential in our bodies. If THC is in mother's milk, and if we now live in a police state that is putting kids on probation and doing P testing, even if they're only giving them a $100 ticket, and they're starting off their young life with less THC, and THC is stored in the fat cells, because keep in mind, alcohol gets out of your body in 24 hours. I think cocaine and heroin in 3 days. THC stays for 2 months, 60 days. That means the body's holding on to it. Now, Christian Lorette, who had terrible scoliosis, was alleviated of a lot of pain by taking about 90 grams. And he kept saying to Rick, "This is expensive, it's precious, give it to the cancer patients." But Rick was very wise to keep pushing it on Christian. And Christian realized that after having this really good quality, excellent oil, and that's why Joe and I are against any kind of regulation, because the experience in Canada is after it's regulated and the government gives it to you, it's just crappy quality. It's not going to produce the results that you see with the really good quality. So once you had the THC, Christian said it lasted for 2 years in his body. It was released on a need-to-use basis. So think about that. What Joe described in his book later on, and it gets really crazy and wild in the future chapters, and he always says, don't try to do this today. You can't do it today. Today in Woodstock, you've got policemen on bicycles lurking around and trying to bust these kids. And I saw one of the cops, and he was very handsome and young, and I said, what do you think about, oh, let's let the blender go a bit. Yeah, good. I told this very kind of gung-ho, attractive cop on a bicycle, I said, what do you think about the fact that marijuana's on Schedule 1 and heroin's on Schedule 2, meaning that Schedule 1 is the most dangerous? This guy went into shock. So that means our policemen aren't getting the right information, or at least a lot of them aren't. So if you think about it, the sad thing is kids can't be as free today. That's the point. There's so many rules and regulations. But the good thing is, it's just like that beautiful poem that we heard from Nick about people who have died for this Constitution. For those of us who understand how to use it, and thanks to Constitution Man, Joe and I, we listen to him at half speed as we're transcribing everything down. And as you get the flow of the case law, you see, it's just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz with the ruby slippers. It just takes a will to click your slippers and claim your freedom. You have to stand up. The Constitution is there, at least for now. If they start doing this thing, one world, and they throw it all out, then that's not good, because as Alan was saying, well, we don't need nations and so on, and I explained to Alan afterwards, I said, it's true, it's a good thing not to have nations, but if you're only having admiralty law or commercial law, you have to have some cultural foundation, and the different cultures have them. I've seen the culture that we have from the Constitution. I've seen the similarities to the Vedas. I haven't studied the Torah as much. I know there's going to be a lot of flack, like you're saying. Ezra Pound was called an anti-Semite. Right now on the internet there's a big push to kind of dump the Bible, and you have all kinds of versions. Is Israel good or bad? I mean, Joe told it, talking about how he was getting hash from this rabbi, and he didn't feel good about the fighting that was going on in the Middle East, but on the other hand he understood the Jews were in bad shape too. But what if people came together in a culture? What if they sat down? Because I mean, I heard this in Cyprus. Cyprus is an island divided, and somebody told me once, on both sides, the Turkish side and the Greek side, they started to relax for a moment. They go, hey, kumbare, and they throw out some hash, and then they start to get friendly, and then somebody snipes them, they kill them. And that gets the tensions all up and the suspicions all up. So it's important, I think, to regain your sovereignty inside and to stand up for what's right and to go with the flow. So does anyone else have anything to add on that, or should we shut the cameras down? Joe, do you have any final thoughts? Yeah.
A psychologist recently defined a new psychological illness. It's called happiness, and he says that he has formed a therapy for it, and he has drugs to make you depressed so that you'll be normal again. And this is a guy who teaches at the University of Iowa.
Yeah, I guess they call it reality therapy. Ooh, isn't it bad and gloomy? But it's not. What's that? Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming. Yeah. There's a lot of people that have been guests on different shows, not only on my show, but I've been in the control room for others. I wonder, Harold, can you say a few words? Please, thank you.
Yeah, sure. What do you want?
Just talk about where you see what inspired you to get into public access?
Oh my Lord!
Say whatever you want.
Oh,
or
well,
what about the evening?
The post-Jurassic era.
Yeah, no, it's just trying to improve the human condition, save the species from blowing itself up and transforming into another species that we're in the middle of going through. No, it's just a sense of the curiosity about everything, trying to improve things. And I love the idea that you can make television and have an effect, yeah.
I want to say the ACAT meetings that we have at your place are just wonderful because we can meet with other producers physically, and that's what we're trying to do here with the viewers.
That's what we did beautifully here tonight. It was great. That Joe is one funny dude. He's really funny. It's good. And Nat Burns is a class act. He is a funny man.
Yeah.
He's really good. So I don't know. I'm a little tired, but anyway, this is a great part.
We want to get more into constitutional
law. How long are you in town?
Also.
Yes, and you guys, you're doing.
So we're
going to
do this again. We'll get into the later chapters and get kind of wild and crazy.
I think that's a great idea. Come and say a word, Maggie. Say a word. You want to say a word? Maggie just fell down. She's got her face. She looked like a ghoul.
What happened,
few
Maggie?
days ago.
I was walking Humphrey and tripped.
Oh my goodness.
Fell down and crashed. I wanted to just do a little bit.
But you picked yourself up, and the show must go on.
Absolutely. Squirting blood and bruised faces, no problem. How's everything?
It's good. What I'm hoping to do with this is to get people together and enjoy the hilarious chapters of Joe's story when they were young in the commune, and then get to the serious stuff about the Constitution. So that's what we're hoping to gain. Any words for Eminem?
Yes. We are in desperate need of
Here, let me get your good side, okay?
No, the country is in dire need of active, intelligent, concerned citizens who understand that in order to have a constitutional democracy, they must participate,
right,
understand the Constitution, and support it,
right,
above all else. It's our linchpin to our freedom, and it takes courage to be able to stand up under a fuselage of people that would beat us down into submission, so that we forget that we are not slaves to the Constitution. The Constitution is our freedom.
Right, right. And now your dad was a judge in California. Did he tell you these things? Or
not specifically. My father imparted to all of his children a great love and respect for the law.
Right.
He also showed us that some laws are not necessarily just, but in order to keep order, they must be obeyed until such time as the laws can be changed and or reinterpreted to the fairness of what the particular statute and law was intended to be.
I wish I could talk to your dad, but I know he's passed on, right?
Yes, he has.
Have you looked at some of the case law that Constitution Man has brought out? Because he could have done it legally, I think. The flow of how you can't take a right, convert it into a privilege, and then charge for it.
Oh, gosh.
That kind of stuff.
That is license to steal.
Yeah.
Whether it's
the Constitution understood that.
Very much so.
Right.
Because the Constitution was written by our founding fathers who came from all different walks of life. Primarily, of course, they were white Christian men.
Right. And landholders.
And landholders, property holders.
But their vision could be extended to more.
But they had not necessarily started that way, because the people who came to America came here for freedom. Freedom from British tyranny.
And religious freedom.
Religious.
30 years war back in Europe was endless war. It's getting to be like that here.
And the faith of the people that came here, the religious faith, was very strong. It was greater than any belief they had in government, which of course had disappointed them.
Yeah.
Had enslaved them, had confined them, had bonded them. And religion was a way of freedom for them.
But were the framers of the Constitution ever bonded? They were never indentured. You said all walks of life. I think that's some of the gripe. When people complain about the Constitution, they say it wasn't written by people who were poor, and yet equal protection and maybe compared to the king they were poor and you were running.
I mean, that cake wasn't good.
What did you think of this evening?
Oh, it was delicious. No, it was different.
It was different.
And I like the idea of the real diversity in the collection that we had here tonight. It was very nice. It was older people, younger people,
right?
Different races. It was good. It was very good.
I could see some of the younger people kind of paying attention when we went into the legal stuff, because that's very useful for them to know.
Actually, I was going to start to interview a couple of the people who are working here, because they really listened.
Yeah, I know. I could
They
tell.
really listened.
Because they never heard anything like this before.
Right. I mean,
but
you
we're
know.
eminent producers, so we kind of used to new
Yes,
thoughts, right?
absolutely. Well, I think. Go on, Dawn.
What did you think of the guy who recited the poem from Ezra Pound?
Well, as a matter of fact.
I was warned he was in no condition to recite, but I thought he was very soulful.
I commented. I spoke to him.
Oh, you did?
I said, I really enjoyed you. I did. I went up to him, and he was pleased, and he could have been taking over. I mean, once you got him started,
Right.
I could see he was, because he got up 3 times.
Well, I'm trying to get into this anti-Semitism issue, and I thought here we are right at the source of a real culture that clarifies a lot of misunderstandings that divide people, and that's my hope for local businesses sponsoring these types of events. Cafe Mocha, Wendy Barrett from the Village Scandal.
I would like to see more of these evenings. They're very good idea. I think what I might do, though, is not too many
chapters, just one at a time.
Yeah, exactly, because
well, the first chapter we could hardly hear. That's
well, that's for sure. So then do some talking so that you can get the people to start to interact.
The only thing is, you've already heard the chapters, and a lot of people have no clue really what happened during the 60s. You know, it was about the culture.
But there are so many stories or anecdotes that he's delivering on each chapter. It's not just usually one thing.
Yeah.
And
well, what I liked about the Hells Angels was it emphasizes the Second Amendment, because the First Amendment of religious freedom, freedom for speech, has to be protected. So if you've got a rogue element, a rogue government coming in, and they start taking over the police, and the police don't operate with warrants and due process, pretty soon you don't have any First Amendment. So that's, in a place like New York, the Second Amendment is very sensitive. Joe and I don't have guns, but we're glad that private citizens do. You know,
well,
and in New York, everybody wants to take away guns, and yet they grumble about the government at the same time. People don't trust the pharmaceuticals, but then they want regulation when they get in their pot groups. So that, you know.
Okay, I'm listening with great interest to the fact that there are so many different reactions that people have. I mean, I'm listening to you about Second Amendment, and I'm saying to my...
Yeah, go on. I want Maggie on Second Amendment. You want to come here because your dad was a judge in the Constitution?
Yeah.
And then we're going to hear from Wendy. How much time do we have, Joe? I want to get 2:58 minutes, because I don't want you to have to edit. 15 more minutes? Okay. We were just talking about the Second Amendment in New York.
Well, I wanted to say I was listening to what you had just said about you don't have any guns personally, but you do approve of the idea that people have it because there's also the military. I started to react.
Right.
Because I really...
You don't like guns?
No, I don't.
Right.
I mean, I think the whole armaments thing has gotten out of hand.
Well, it's okay not to have guns if you've got the police operating under the Constitution, but if they're not operating the Constitution, then it's whoever has the most guns. And if you've got the most people, I mean, what do you think about that? Did you hear her talking about her dad who was a judge and the Constitution? Because if you throw out the Second Amendment, it doesn't hang together.
Well, actually, the way I interpret the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms, I have a different take on it. Because when this amendment was written back in the late 1700s, the availability of something called a firearm was very rare. They were handmade. Not everybody had them, but for me, that's not what that amendment meant. For me, it meant the right to protect yourself, the right to bear arms, which is whether it's with a cudgel or a sword or your fist, it is there to be able to protect yourself against powers that be.
Right.
And if it graduates with different types of weaponry in the terms of armaments, that's something else. But it is your right to be able to defend yourself, even if it is your arm, your bodily arm and fist that you raise in order to protect yourself. And nobody can deny you that right to protect yourself, to bear your arm against somebody who is going to harm you.
Right.
Yeah,
that is my interpretation.
I've even seen some deep legal explanations saying that false arrest is so bad that if it's really clear that your right has been violated, you can protect yourself up until death if you have to kill somebody to protect yourself. I mean, it's a grisly thing to have to think about, but it makes you think how important search warrants are, how important due process is, and certainly equal protection, because the rich guy can hire all the guns he wants.
But also there's something that's rare in terms of the right to bear arms. And they talk about the lethalness of that which you use to protect yourself. And for instance, a prize fighter who is a pugilist and his weapon is his fists and his arms, if he kills somebody in a barroom brawl, designated as a lethal weapon because he is a professional at destroying a person with his arms.
Maybe that's what martial arts is all about, which is also a spiritual practice. Staying in shape. Well, we want to flex their muscles with the Constitution. That's the belligerent claimant. Do you feel like...
But the greater and broader meaning of the Second Amendment to me is the right to defend yourself.
Wendy, what do you think about the right to defend yourself with the Constitution?
Well, personally, I don't think we do have the right to bear arms. I think that we have the right to bear harmony and love, and I think it was misconstrued.
So you don't agree that the Second Amendment should be there?
No.
So you trust the police?
No, I don't trust the police. I don't think anybody should have arms. Such as in England and some other countries. I think we don't need arms.
Did you hear what
Joe?
I couldn't hear all of it.
Joe, do you want to come in?
Because she wasn't talking about it as arms in the conventional sense of use. I mean, she broadened it considerably because from the arm, the right to protect yourself. The right to protect yourself. Okay, that's all, basically. But I understand your point, and I accept it without any difficulty.
I think what they did in England is wonderful, and they have less than 5 handgun murders a year there. You know, so it's
Joe,
obviously
I know
works.
Strong comments on this. The right to bear arms with that chapter about hippies with machine guns. Remember that part of it?
Oh, I support the American people's rights to bear arms, because if the American people aren't armed and only the police have guns, then we live in a true police state with no protection. But Paul always wants me to talk about the Constitution. But I would like to tell all the viewers out there, they should go to Paula Gloria's website on YouTube. And I know a little about the Constitution, not enough to really give advice, more than the average person, but you should check out Constitution Man, Kick-Ass Constitution Man on Paula Gloria's website. And you should also check out Gene Keating. All Americans should really learn the law, because it's your rights that you got to protect.
And also
Thank you.
Angela Stark's internet show.
Yes, also Angela Stark's internet show. Tell them how to get there.
I think it's myprivateaudio.com.
I think you should educate everybody. Once a week, have a class.
Well, this is why I really want to thank Wendy Barrett of the Village Scandal, because this has been my dream for a long time, to have local business really participate in the quality of media that's coming out. And I mean, you know, we got a poet that recited to Ezra Pound himself in St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Thank you, Wendy. You made it happen.
Pleasure. Repeat those names again of who the sites.
It's on Paula Gloria's website.
But actually, you can just Google.
There's the Constitution Man.
Kick-ass. I made it pick up in the search engine.
It's Kick-Ass Constitution Man.
Is that you, Joe?
Yeah,
No, that's not me. That's Carl Miller. He knows a lot more than me. I know more than the average person, but I learn a lot from him.
Oh, okay, good.
And the second one is Gene Keating.
J-E-A-N.
Okay.
Keating, K-E-A-T-I-N-G. And I created playlists. I put 27 parts of Gene Keating's Orlando, Florida lectures together. And Kick-Ass Constitution Man is parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. Joe Friendly, do you have final words to say? And stick around, Shanti. You may have some comments on Joe's comments. I mean, this is my idea, to get New York getting out and discussing. We have different ideas. Wendy's talking about the policemen in England that don't have guns.
Yeah, I think you know what she's hearing.
Yeah, so what are you thinking?
I want to go back. I didn't really finish up about the demur at the pleading. If you demur, the grounds are that fundamental constitutionally protected individual human rights are at stake, and those were, I began to say, the right of freedom of thought. Oh yeah. In addition to freedom of thought, there's the right of liberty, freedom to act bounded only as harming the rights of others, or some logic to it. So anyhow, you show a bunch of rights. The right to pursue happiness, marijuana seems to help along those lines. Good sex, you know what I mean? Pursue happiness. So you can throw that in the judge's face. But what I like to say is that it only takes one, Judge. And how about liberty and freedom of thought? Okay, those two. That's enough for the burden to shift to the state. Can they now justify their law in the face of constitutionally protected rights? And you don't win then, but you do have a hearing whether the state can justify the law, that there's some reason. And I want to say, I was saying before that today on Channel 5, they had the head of the Drug Enforcement Agency, a woman named, what is her name? Mary Jean Leonhardt, something like that. And she said, she was debating, she said, she's the one who recently claimed that there's a logic to it being on Schedule 1 because there's no medical benefit. And so the other side was saying, come on, obviously there's medical benefit. And she said, anything that you have to smoke, we're up front saying couldn't be of medical benefit. That was her argument.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought that was pretty raw.
Yes.
That's one more example of how the marijuana laws are really a testament to the wrong of our government all along. We've been living a big lie.
But what about Rick Simpson saying smoking destroys the medicine 90%? And what's your experience?
Smoking works on me.
What about oil?
Huh?
What about oil?
The oil is a body high, I find, that when I smoke it, I can be more conscious of the mental processes involved in coming up with words. When I do the oil, the words just come nicely. Law enforcement professionals against prohibition and come from tobacco. But it turns out smoking marijuana doesn't hurt the lungs nearly like nicotine, which is a poison. But the body gets along pretty comfortably with smoking marijuana.
Some have claimed pot smokers have less lung cancer than
Right, yeah, exactly. So but anyhow, the point, get off pot?
Yeah, do the Constitution.
Oh, so the idea is that when you can demonstrate to the court that there are constitutional rights, then you ask the court to announce that the burden has shifted to the state, and then the state attempts a showing, and then you hear. You know, that's the whole point, is we just want to get to the point of, okay, let's have the lawyer who represents the state of New York or the local or the whole statewide, the Attorney General, you're supposed to serve him. You're supposed to serve the Attorney General even if you're in a low court. If you're challenging the constitutionality of a state law, you serve, and he shows up, and the Attorney General is supposed to be aware of the proceedings and defend the law.
I see.
So if the Attorney General is honest, he will admit that the real basis of the law is not the good stuff that ordinarily would suffice to win. He'd have to say all we got going on our side is arbitrary demonization driven by politics. And one story along that line, I want to tell the story of Frederick Vinson. You ever heard of that name ring any bells? Frederick Vinson is the one who cooked up the laws in 1937. And he was a congressman in charge of the Finance Committee. And he routed the law through the Finance Committee by making it a tax law rather than through the Drug and Health Committee, which would have considered whether marijuana is healthy or bad or whatever. But at his hearing, the AMA sent a representative, a doctor, who testified that the AMA's position was that the law shouldn't be that marijuana is good. And when it got to the floor of the House for a vote, someone called out, "And what is the AMA's position?" And Frederick Vincent announced to all the congressmen before they voted that the AMA's position was that they were fully in favor of his legislation. He lied big time. And he went on to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So the marijuana laws were conceived in sin. And it's been one big lie after another. And the irony of ironies, if I were to have this Drug Enforcement Admission, whatever, is that the U.S. government holds patent number 6630507. You can look it up online.